Hey there, everyone. Good Monday afternoon to you. I'm meteorologist Valerie Mills. Thanks for joining me for SkyTower weather now on what has been a hot couple of days. In fact, record-breaking on Sunday for many Tampa Bay spots. We take you outside to Pioneer Park there in Zolfo Springs. You see the temperature reading there at that site, 96 degrees. Winds pretty light here around the area. About 6 miles per hour there in the Zolfo Springs area. Looks like this camera shot not wanting to load up for us, although I was just looking at it a second ago, so maybe it'll play ball here. But this from the University of South Florida, where you see the temperature reading there sitting right at 94 degrees. We roll back to talk about what happened yesterday, as it really landed in the record books. We hit 100 degrees for the first time ever here in Tampa. This comes from the Tampa International Airport. The maximum temperature we had ever reached here in the area, as far as records go back to the 1890s, that was 99 degrees, set back in June of 2020. And so we really had that benchmark. We had never hit 100 degrees. We can roll that out the window now, as we had that official triple degree temperature mark yesterday. And in fact, we actually hit 100 yesterday. It happened right around 3:30 in the afternoon, and then again right around the 5 o'clock hour. And Tampa was not the only spot that reached records across the area yesterday. Several other spots getting up there. You see Brooksville and Winter Haven. We did see 99 to 98 degrees there. So both of those spots just by a degree setting new records for the day. But particularly in Brooksville, look at that old record. That has been held since 1930. So these are some long-standing records in some cities that were able to break that for the day yesterday. Winter Haven 98, that broke the old record of 97, set back in 1996. Ruskin also at 98. St. Pete hit 96, breaking the old record of 95, set back in the 1940s. And so here we go again. Heat advisory is in place all across the area, and in fact, our northern spots under an extreme heat warning. So yes, it's hot by Florida standards, of course, but we are talking really dangerous heat conditions out there for several hours in the afternoon. So this heat advisory runs across the area through 7 p.m. as really even in the overnight hours, we haven't had a whole lot of relief. Our normal low at this point in the year is 77 in Tampa. Look at our lows this morning. We only were able to get down to 84 in both Tampa and Clearwater. St. Pete only bottomed out at 83. This just speaks to the magnitude of, even in our overnight hours, not getting any of that relief, especially for immediate Tampa Bay and our coastal spots. You see Bradenton down the coast to Venice only bottoming out just shy of 80 degrees. And then cool spot on the board that I'm seeing here, Brandon at 73, and Wauchula Arcadia did bottom out right around 75 for overnight lows. But we look back at the last 18 hours, you see those mid 80s for a large chunk of the late night hours last night into the early morning hours. We just started to kick in that warm up already, warming through about 85, 86 by the 8 o'clock hour. Broke out into the 90s right around lunchtime, and here is where we stand out there right now. Now we're making a run into record territory yet again for today. But look at these highs, or these temperatures right now across the area. Bartow to Wesley Chapel, 97. Brooksville, you're up to 97 as well. Brandon, 95. Clearwater sitting at 96. That's also the temperature in Northport. Lake Placid to Sebring at 97. Across the board, above average temperatures. We factor the humidity on top of the actual air temperature. That tells us what it really feels like outside. And these heat indices, those have been really extreme. And this is what is prompting our heat advisories. As we're talking, feels like temperatures ranging from 105 to really, you see Clearwater up to 120. And on the brunt of it, Tampa, Wesley Chapel, 113 is what it's feeling like outside. Bradenton feeling like 112. Newport Richey feeling like 118. So these are very extreme heat index values, even for us here in the Sunshine State. Here's a big part of that, the humidity. You may often hear the saying, it's not the heat, but it's the humidity. That is absolutely true. You see these low 80s right now, just brutal for a dew point. Even in the thick of the summer, we're talking 80 to 81, just air you can wear, as they say. And so you see all up and down the state, triple-digit heat index values, pretty much the exception. Down in Key West, 97 is what it's feeling like for you. But even in West Palm to Miami, low triple digits. And look at Panama City up there at 112 at this hour for our heat index. And And we're not really the only areas that are dealing with this. Just look at all across the southeast. This is not the temperature, but with the humidity, we are talking many spots across the southeast, all the way along the Gulf Coast and extending up to parts of the mid-Atlantic, where temperatures and as far as heat index values soaring into the triple digits, with actual temperatures in the 90s for many spots. And that is under this heat dome. They've been riding out this heat wave for the last couple of days. A very strong heat dome continues to be in place across the east and the southeast. That's going to start to nudge a little bit more west. We'll see it break down by the end of the week a bit more, but heat advisories and extreme heat warnings, they stretch from us here in the Sunshine State and Central Florida spots. And just look at how many states are dealing with those, all the way up to places like Chicago and the Great Lakes, Omaha, under an extreme heat warning. Also Memphis, Raleigh, Atlanta, all of these areas up to Cincinnati, and even New York and Boston under heat advisory criteria. And this is expected to continue right on through Wednesday, as this heat dome really is dominating the weather for a large chunk of the country. And as we look at the forecast for tomorrow, many spots are up into that dangerous heat category yet again, with mid-90s to low 100s. And you know it's hot for many when they are topping out above us as far as the temperature trend for parts of Florida. So we're going to be up there in the mid and upper 90s as well, but you see some 100s on the board. Dallas to Little Rock, that is some big time heat for parts of that country. So there you see the heat risk outlook. We're in this major to extreme for today. Tomorrow on into Wednesday, we start to scale it back for a lot of portions of the southeast. And then by the end of the week, a little bit of heat relief is on the way, as our pattern is going to change up. This high pressure that's been baking us in these temperatures is going to start to move out of here. And at the end of the week, we will be talking about a cold front that is swinging in to parts of the East Coast. But here's a look at our records, and you see we start to scale it back, especially by Thursday. 93 degrees. I mean, it sounds cool when we're talking about 97 and tying a record for today. And then come Tuesday, we're forecasting 95. The record sits at 97. Actually, 2022, you see that stretch there where we hit 97 for 3 days in a row. That's where those records lie. But at least as we start to ramp up the storm chances, we wind down the heat just a bit. But it's a good opportunity to talk about some heat safety tips, as we have really been dealing with this for days on end. It's important to know you want to wear loose, lightweight, and light-colored clothing. Also, stay well hydrated. Even if you're not thirsty, you should be drinking water. Just give your body what it needs. And of course, that comes with plenty of breaks inside in the AC. And that really is important, because a lot of folks don't really fully understand what we're talking about sometimes with this heat index. And that all ties in with the humidity. And it does make a big difference for our bodies. When things are humid out there, our sweat doesn't evaporate, and so our bodies don't cool down. So all of the moist air that's around us on days like today, where it is just so humid, of course, that makes us much more uncomfortable, as we're not able to sweat, evaporate, and cool off, compared to a dry heat, which at the very least, even though it's still hot out there, that drier air does allow moisture to evaporate, which in the end does cool our bodies off more. So that's why we're always hammering home the heat index, because that does make a big impact in what our bodies are actually feeling like. Important to know heat stroke, heat exhaustion, and some signs to look out for this time of the year, as yes, we are no strangers to the humidity here in Florida, but especially the heat as well. So some other heat safety tips, really important to remember: never leave pets, children in the car, as just look at how much hotter the air inside a car is compared to the actual temperature. We're talking on a day very similar to today, 95 degrees. The car gets up to 133 in about 40 minutes. And even in a 10-minute time span, we're talking the air inside the car about 20 degrees warmer, up to 115 degrees. And so that's really important to remember, as people don't realize it only takes a couple of minutes. You should never leave pets in the car, even the windows cracked and things like that. Doesn't make a big difference. And also important to remember the ground. We're talking the ground being so much hotter for our furry friends. And so 95 degrees, that means the sidewalk is running closer to 125, and the asphalt, the road, up to 140, especially in direct sun. You'll want to find any amount of shade, and of course, shaded grass makes a big difference, as when we're talking conditions like this on a day like today, pause within 5 minutes can get really burnt, and a lot of people don't realize how important that is to remember. And so just a couple of things to keep in mind as we're really getting going here into the dog days of summer. So what do we have to look forward to? Well, we have some signs that the heat gets scaled back by the middle and especially the end of the week as this high pressure starts to slide a little bit more to the west. That opens the moisture pool for us. We've been dealing with winds out of the northeast. We get winds out of the southwest. That starts to pull in more of that moisture, ramp up our storm chances. But we'll be talking more details about this area of low pressure as it drags across northern parts of the country. You see the cold front on its tail, stationary front that drags up. That actually is going to be a key player for us as we look ahead later in the week. You do know us talking about some of the times these fronts as they swing into the east, they do bring the potential for some tropical development. So we'll talk more about that coming up in our second block of the show, but we will be talking about that area for some potential tropical interest here looking ahead later on this week. Wanted to give you a check on SkyTower radar as things have been relatively quiet. Of course, it's a trade-off as we don't have much heat out there. It does come with fewer thunderstorms. And so really, as we start to ramp up the thunderstorm coverage, we will see more of these in place looking ahead to tomorrow, but especially on Wednesday. But really, we have not seen a whole lot of shower activity out there, and it's right along our immediate Bay Area spots where some of that coverage is in place. You see around Deltona an isolated shower there, and we did have some of those late night thunderstorms last night, a couple of those moving in from the northeast, tracked right across our Bay Area spots right around 6 and 7 o'clock last night. So from Palm Harbor, area of heavy rain just to the south for you, continuing to drift further south. So areas around Dunedin starting to see that heavy rain roll through for you. And really our main threat is going to be locally heavy rain, but also some frequent lightning. So we'll be watching that as this is heading more into the downtown Dunedin area. Safety Harbor to Clearwater, we'll keep an eye on that for you. But right now just some sprinkles for Clearwater across to the Bayview area. And as we take it further south, we do have this area of heavy rain that we're also watching right outside downtown St. Pete, down into the Gulfport area and Johns Pass down to Treasure Island and Sunset Beach. Have seen some of that shower activity for you, but this is just starting to bubble up, so expecting that to generally drift in the area of St. Pete Beach as well as Tierra Verde. And keeping a close eye on the radar as more of these will start to pop up here, but nothing expected to be too significant out there as we're really only tracking about 20% shower chances through the remainder of today. So there's how it shakes out. We still have this dominant wind that's coming off of the north and east. However, some of the sea breeze collisions will ride up for the evening hours. You see through 7 o'clock, any of those generally drift to the coast. We clear out from there. Looking ahead to tomorrow, a quiet start to the day, and then showers and thunderstorms will pop, and a couple of those will fill in a bit more for the afternoon and the evening hours. And then from there, we're talking spotty storm coverage, but we're back up to 40 and 50% here in the coming days. And so you see the trend, 97 down to the low in the mid-90s as we're back up to more scattered thunderstorms. And still, the heat is going to be quite extreme as we're talking heat index values from about 105 to 112 for a large portion of the area again tomorrow. That heat advisory is in place across Tampa Bay with lows tonight in the low 80s for Tampa Bay, low to mid 70s for some of our inland spots, but many areas will bottom out in the upper 70s to low 80s. There's a look at your highs tomorrow as we're making a run at 96 yet again with mid and upper 90s across the area. We'll have a look at your 7-day forecast and we'll talk about the tropics, watching an area for potential interest of development here around the Sunshine State later on this week. More of those details to come right after a short break. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back into the show. Talking tropics now, as of course we're starting to get into what is considered the peak of our Atlantic hurricane season, August. And of course, as we head to the start and middle of September, we really ramp up the activity here around the area. But so far, no complaints here. Only 3 named storms, no hurricanes. We have had some active tropical systems, moisture from Barry that added to the Texas floods that we saw. Tropical storm Chantal also causing flooding in North Carolina. But on average, we get 14 named storms in a season, 7 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes. And we have started to see some signs of life in the Atlantic basin. We'll start by looking ahead to the end of July and through August 5th. So there is this outlook here that expands yet again the same areas we've been watching for what we call these homegrown systems. That's when they form very close to the coast and generally tend to be weaker as they interact with land and they don't have much time to develop. But you see this pink blob that extends basically from the far eastern edge of the coast of Texas all the way spanning across the Sunshine State up into the Carolinas. We do have a less than 20% chance for development as we look to the start of August. And the big picture here is we're going to start to see a ridge of high pressure build in across the north, especially over the Great Lakes region, and then a weakening cold front that we talked about earlier in the show. As that makes its way across the east, it starts to slow down, and along that cold front, we could see an area of low pressure, something try and spin up in this region. So we'll be keeping very close tabs on that. This is what we would typically expect during this point in the hurricane season, as still we look to the main development regions, seeing some signs of life there, as well as we look at the big picture here. This is what we're talking about. This is where we typically expect some of our tropical waves to originate, is off the coast of Africa, where note still seeing a lot of this Saharan air, that drier dust that typically suffocates a system, prevents it from developing more, and can even impact stronger hurricanes and stronger systems as they are getting a little bit more organized. But you see that white line that extends off the coast of Africa. That's the ITZZ. That's what we call the Intertropical Convergence Zone. And it's pretty essential for where we see some of those waves spin up, but it's basically a band of low pressure right near the equator where the trade winds of the northern and the southern hemisphere converge, kind of clash together. And in some cases, that can lead to rising air. And of course, we know that's the first sign of life and the first ingredient for a tropical system. And so it does start to enhance that potential area of storm activity. And so we're watching for the potential for some tropical waves to kick off the coast of Africa, right just to the south of that Saharan air. And maybe we start to see some areas of low pressure try and close off and get a little bit more organized, as there are some signs later on, several days out, as these would generally drift west, that there could be some more environmental favored conditions for some additional development. And so right now, we're just going to have to watch it very closely, as it is that point in the year where waters are warming up, the Saharan air breaks down just a bit, and so these waves, as they kick off the coast of Africa, they generally have a better shot at forming. And now as we start to talk about our climatology for August, you see we really open the window for where these tropical systems can spread and or originate from. And so we don't just talk about these systems in the Caribbean, parts of the Gulf, off the Atlantic. We really start to see them forming well out into the open Atlantic, and that does, of course, offer more time for strengthening over those warmer waters. And so here, as we close out July, we really start to see our biggest increase in tropical activity all the way through August, peaking on September 10th. That is, on average, the peak of our Atlantic hurricane season. Dexter is the next name in line. And as we talk about the Pacific, things very busy. This is a combination of the eastern Pacific storms as well as the central Pacific storms. As Iona, you see that there on the far left, that's actually our first hurricane of the central Pacific. Remember, we have 2 basins here. As they generally drift farther west, we have that transition over from the eastern Pacific to the central Pacific. You see where Hawaii is in reference to that, and 2 other systems on the heels for potential development. And so things really active across the eastern Pacific as well as parts of the central Pacific Pacific now after things were really generally pretty quiet out there last week and starting to ramp up that activity. There's a look at temperatures right now up and down the Sunshine State, many mid-90s. We take you to a wide look around the country where we are not the only ones dealing with extreme heat. Atlanta right now 97 for you. New York City tying with us at 94. Denver has us beat 95 degrees. Phoenix at 104, and even around Dallas topping out right now in the mid-90s. It's not just the heat that's really making it feel very intense out there, but also the humidity. I mean, when we're talking upper 70s to 82 in Tampa, I mean, that's pretty much about as humid as we can be talking about. And so when we know we have these mid-70s, which we are seeing across a large chunk of the eastern tier of the country, that tacks on how much hotter it feels out there. And so we're talking temperatures in the mid-90s, in some cases feeling about 10 degrees warmer, with a dew point right now in Kansas City up to 78. That's pretty high. Beats you out there in New Orleans, where the dew point is 77, and then we have about 76 in the Chicago area with some mid-60s as we head further north into Minneapolis, Bismarck, and the Buffalo area. So as we talk about where weather is active, we are going to be eyeing parts of the northern plains and the upper Midwest today. That's where our severe threat is going to be focused, especially across parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, as there are going to be the potential for some damaging winds. We're just starting to see some thunderstorms fire up, but overall, no major airport delays. We are seeing those focused across the Northeast, where right around Detroit, hour and 15-minute delay with some storms just rolling through the area. Newark also dealing with about a 3-hour delay, but not seeing that at any of our New York proper airports. And things looking good here around the Sunshine State, as we're not really dealing with the threat for much rain and storm activity today. We will see more of that later on this week. But there you see it, that level 4 out of 5 risk for severe storms. We're really going to watch the potential. A lot of available storm energy in this portion of the country, and so storms are going to fire up. They will linger tonight and into tomorrow morning, and it's really the threat for straight line winds that we'll be watching. We could see some of these stronger storms also produce some hail, but it's really going to be this threat for 80 and in some cases 80 plus mile per hour winds, and that's going to target these areas through tonight as the thunderstorms will fire up and in some cases linger into Tuesday. Still high pressure, driving a lot of heat across the country, but there you see that storm system that I was just talking to you about, with an area of low pressure spinning right around Minneapolis and severe thunderstorm potential already for areas around North Dakota as well as Montana. And otherwise, we're going to get a little bit more relief from the heat as that cold front is going to continue to dive further into the south and southeast here in the next couple of days. But you see the temperatures all across the area, and we are feeling that Florida heat extending further up the I-95 corridor. Here's a look at conditions around the area, and I have one more break to send it to before we talk more details with your 7-day forecast on the other side of this break. Well, doesn't this look nice? It's a good way to spend a Monday afternoon if you ask me. We're taking you farther south to sunny Isles Beach, Miami. Plenty of blue sky there, lots of heat. Many of us dealing with sweltering temperatures yet again, but a few thunderstorms in the mix. We take you to SkyTower radar where we are seeing a couple of areas starting to pop up and expecting more of these here the next couple of hours, but spotty thunderstorm coverage will be in place today and tomorrow before we really start to build back in more of that 50% typical thunderstorm activity during the afternoon and evening time frame the next few days. You see Hernando Beach, some heavy rain starting to drift into your area, still tracking that thunderstorm right across parts of Dunedin, stretching across Oldsmar, Safety Harbor, down to Clearwater, and the Bayview area, starting to see some of that shower activity spread for you, and also from St. Pete, especially St. Pete Beach down to Tierra Verde, dealing with some heavy rain there, and we'll continue to deal with more of these through about sunset with clearing beyond. There's a look at your 7-day forecast with another heat advisory in place for Tuesday afternoon, right on through 7 p.m. on Tuesday. Thanks to everyone for being here with me for SkyTower Weather Now. We'll see you back here same time, same place tomorrow.